Around 2010, I began working for a company and noticed that the receptionist desk was never occupied. The reason was that as a tech company, their front door was now their website. And as a marketer tasked with driving leads into the company, the website was the primary target of all of our activities. Websites have gone from being flat brochures to today being the interactive lifeline of most businesses. But without understanding how to develop and optimize those sites, our businesses can come up short of our goals. Today's guest is one of my favorite go-tos when it comes to understanding what needs to be done to optimize a website. He's considered a leading content marketer due to his generosity in sharing his marketing knowledge through thousands of articles, speaking engagements, and conferences, including his own conference called Content Jam. So without further delay, let's welcome to the show, Andy Crestodina. Hi, Andy.
Hi, Lee. Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
It is a pleasure. We've seen each other at different events and haven't had time to talk very much. I really admire and benefit from your content. So I want to make sure I can share this with the audience because you are definitely a resource to me and I think and a great resource to others as well. So
thank you for that.
Thanks for joining. Yeah.
Oh, happy to be here.
So first of all, we met a few weeks ago. I mentioned that while I'm on LinkedIn, your posts are the most saved pieces of content that I run across. I see the blog post or the article post and I save it because each time I see your tips, I want to either take action or make sure that we are already doing this with our websites, all the things you suggested. And I think that's content marketing at its best because I'm sold on what you know and what you do. So tell us, how is your generosity in educating your audience translated into business value?
Oh, so the original purpose and the first content strategy, although I probably didn't even call it that, was just the realization that, wow, people only need a website maybe every 4 years. And how do I keep in touch with, this was 15 years ago and I had, a couple hundred contacts and thought to myself, I need an efficient way to stay top of mind with these decision makers in that long interim in the sales cycle. So I'll write an article, I'll put it on our site, I'll send it as a newsletter, and I'll do it every month. And so that was the original purpose was to just be top of mind. What people ask me about sometimes is like, why does your content strategy not really address web design exclusively? That's all you do is web development. Why do you keep talking about, content strategy and analytics and, all these SEO topics? And you know as well as I do, I mean, you're a longtime pro content strategist, Lee, so this is obvious to you, but I would never have the attention and I would never be top of mind to these marketing leaders if I only talked about web development. Probably my main audience would be web developers. So the whole point of it is just to stay visible because we do something that people don't need every day. So how do you maintain durable visibility in that long interim? Content marketing.
So you mentioned, I do have some background in web development. And as a web designer and developer myself, I grew to understand that there was a very distinct difference between web design and web development. And I love that your site, from my perception, leans heavily to the development part. So can you talk to us a moment on the difference between, and maybe some of the misunderstandings that companies have about the difference between web design and web development?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you do keyword research, you'll find that they're almost equivalent. And if you think about the intent of the visitor, who needs a new website, or the intent of the searcher who needs a new website, they may not be differentiating much in their mind. This person might just be searching for, Chicago web design, Chicago web development. It's like the search results have a lot of overlap. I think Chicago web development tends to pull up more careers and might be more likely to be a job seeker. But I think what kind of the point, the important part of their question there is that these are actually completely different skills, different people, different roles on a team. So if you think about every website as being a combination of three things: the brand, the content, and the container for that content, the design itself, then you realize that to build a great website, you have a variety of specialists involved. There's, of course, has to be a project manager. There, of course, has to be, conversion copywriters. There's often an analyst who helps do the research, brand alignment, keywords. But the construction of a website requires someone who's an expert at conversion and UX and aesthetics, and also requires another person. Typically, it's a separate person for larger projects. Sometimes there's small teams of both, but someone that understands front-end programming, browser compatibility, mobile responsiveness, integration with third-party systems, the CMS setup. And so there are every great site that you see has both a strong, had a strong, talented person working on the visuals and front end and UX and design, and likely had another person who was very focused on the back end, construction, building of features, testing, CMS, other integrations. That's web development. So great web comes from when the designers and the developers work very closely together, right? There's kind of overlap here. Right? JavaScript is which is that? It's a bit of both. But when they work closely together, that's when the magic happens. And that's why it's not really a reliable path to success to have, these are the designers over here. And when the design's all done, then we hand the whole thing off, all these layered files, it's all done in Figma or Sketch. And now it goes to another team, sometimes another country. Like that's not ideal for the best outcomes, because really some of the coolest things that are possible in web and the highest converting pages are done when those teams work together closely.
So you mentioned a moment ago about, let me say it this way. Let me ask you this. From your expert opinion, I want to make sure that our listeners have this very clear. Which would you rather have? A website that wins artistic design awards or a website that has a high conversion rate?
I love that. Thank you for the question, because I get to make one of my favorite points. Let's first ask the question from the perspective of our audience, because after all, that's why we're here. Yeah. Think about the visitor. So this person in zero moment of truth, something happens in their life, right? There's a true story in the life of every visitor to every web page. What brought them here? They search, they see search results, they click, they land. What do they really care about on this page? Why do they take action, become a lead, or don't? Is it beauty? Not usually. Go look at your own browsing history. Scan through those dozens or hundreds of websites. Why did you take action or not take action on those pages? Was it beauty? Probably not. So I'm going to I say this with some sensitivity, because we have 6 full-time designers and I love their work, and everyone loves beauty. But the bigger factor in why people do and don't take action isn't the design. It's more likely the content. Did it satisfy information needs? Did it address the visitor's objections? Did it answer their questions? Did it support those answers with evidence? This is why, and I have friends, Karen Hopper, I did a webinar with her recently. She works for Razorfish, massive agency, you know them. She runs testing programs. What are they testing? Content. That's all they test anymore. They're not testing UX. They're not testing beauty. Why would they focus on content? Because that is the key success factor in conversion rates. So short answer, I'd rather have a high converting website. That's a business objective. Beauty is not a business objective.
And most of our audience, I would say large majority, are business oriented, B2B marketers. But even if it's B2C, if it's business oriented, conversion has to be a goal, right? I mean, that's the reason it's there. But I was introduced to you through the world of content marketing. So let's talk about content. And you're clearly a leader in this space. And I want to see if you can relate and expand on this thought. When I first get an inquiry from a client, the first thing that I do is examine their existing website. Not only to see their commitment to good marketing practice, but since my company produces content for businesses, we want to see what kind of content they're already producing. So from a content marketing and web development standpoint, what do you say when you see a website that is still more brochure than content?
Well, there are the 2 main types of key phrases we search for every day are the commercial intent phrases and the information intent phrases. 80% of all queries people do are for information intent phrases. They want an answer. They're looking for some help. They want to solve their own problem. They want advice. So those are the content marketing gives you access to that vast audience of people who just want answers and advice and help, and they want to learn their professional development. They're looking for best practices, practical tips. If you don't have a content marketing program, you've excluded all of that potential awareness. you've limited yourself to just the bottom of funnel stuff. And your site can only really target commercial intent key phrases. A site without content marketing is an online brochure. That's all it is. It's an online brochure waiting to be downloaded. There's no advice. There's no heartbeat. There's no pulse. There's no reason why you'd go twice, right? You'd only go to this website once. So for us, 85% of our visitors are to our blog. It's like 1.2 million visitors a year or something. The out-of-pocket expense for me for that is zero. It's all just done through content marketing. So is there another path to attracting millions of visitors, hundreds of thousands of subscribers and followers, thousands of links from other websites that support your ranking for those other more valuable phrases? Not that I know of. It is an amazing era to live in. It's a huge opportunity. People that fail to do that, it's like, are you trying to keep your secrets? I don't know. Lee, you know all the objections, right? Why don't people do it? It's weird. I guess they're lack of time, lack of commitment, lack of understanding of the channel, lack of awareness of squeamishness about being public sometimes. I don't know. But no, it's no blog, no content marketing, no podcast. You've got an online brochure. Best of luck to you. That's all. You've limited yourself a bit here. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned about different forms of content someone can have on their website. And I wonder, from your standpoint, let me go back a little bit, because there's a few things we hit on there. Let's get back into the SEO part. I mean, so we're talking about driving traffic to the website. Mm-hmm. And something I think you have unique in your content is the amount of research you have. So you mentioned a lot of things that anybody could do in terms of, and I think maybe I would call it low-hanging fruit, mm-hmm. writing about what they do, sharing their expertise. But even I myself find the research part as a higher hurdle, which I think you are winning at. So tell me, how do you find time, or how do you manage to, or maybe just you prioritize having research? Because I think that's why you get a lot of backlinks. That's why I would link to you, is because you have mm-hmm. new information. So tell me about your approach on research and content.
Well, it is a magical, almost all-powerful format for content. If you want to publish something that gets the attention of journalists, or that inspires other people to reference it, that gets shared more, that gets linked to more, those links are valuable in supporting all of your rankings. It's called authority if you're an SEO. Then it is the one format for content that it has 100x the value and results of any other. So original research is basically when you stop and ask, is there a missing statistic in this industry? What do people frequently say, but rarely support with evidence? The missing stat. What is the frequently asserted, but rarely supported thing in our industry? So I'll give you some examples of these sort of questions we've answered with data on our site. What features are most popular on websites? How long does it take someone to write a blog post? Why do people share things and follow others in social media? Why do marketers think people share things and follow others in social media? There's a big gap there. That was a fun that was a fun survey, sort of a dual survey. What's a good bounce rate? What percentage of what's a good engagement rate for Google Analytics 4? So when you answer these questions, then you support what other people are doing in their content, and then you're like a better internet citizen. You're adding more value. Your content is instantly differentiated because you're the only person with that piece of data. I don't really do content audits for clients, but if I did, I might ask this question: is there any information for which this website is the primary source? By publishing original research, you have the opportunity to make your website, your domain, right, that URL, the primary source for new information. When you think of it that way, it becomes, you get some clarity on why it's such a powerful format. Yeah. It's just more valuable.
That is golden. I mean, even today, if I'm writing an article and I know something to be true, but I don't own the research, I might skim through Andy's stuff to say, I know he's done this research somewhere. Let me find where I can link to his research to help back up my content. So that's an example of your content first of all, being stronger because of the research, and then other content marketers wanting to link to your content because it supports their content. If they're not able to do their own research, which everyone should try to, but they can't research everything. So,
well, in the last week, so we just published our 9th annual blogger survey. We get 1,000 bloggers to answer 20 questions. In the last week, someone wrote about it. Someone wrote an article that mentioned it on WordPress.com. That's a Domain Authority 95 website. On SearchEngineJournal.com. That's a Domain Authority 90 website. I mean, I didn't do any outreach. I'm not pitching stories. It's just, these are just people spontaneously finding it and link to it. SEOs maybe are skeptical that this is possible, but I'm going to put it in plain English. Can you build a content strategy that organically, spontaneously attracts high domain authority links every week with zero effort? Yes, it is possible. I'm showing you just put orbitmedia.com into your favorite SEO tool and look at it. We never do outreach, except to get survey respondents, because that's how you get the primary data. But it's extremely effective.
You do extreme quality, and that's something that I think what you do is a case study for quality content, and we all appreciate that. So thank you again for that.
Well, thanks, Lee. I appreciate it. You know what it takes, so that means a lot coming from you.
I know what it takes, and I know I'm like, boy, that's a high bar, and I appreciate it. That's why I love to reference you, because I know what it takes. I know it's not fluff. It's a lot of work, and I look at it and go, wow, they put a lot of work into that content. It deserves all the accolades it can get. So.
Oh yeah, 15 hours, 20 hours. The annual survey, more than 100 hours. Who else? I mean, if you want to be different, you're differentiating when you're spending 100 hours on a single piece of content. It's a big lift, but it's usually 10x efforts that lead to 100x rewards.
Yeah. Well, so speaking of rewards, I mean, a lot of our rewards come from Google. So let's dig into some of the more stressful details of maintaining a website, which is keeping up with what Google defines as optimized. If a company's site is effective in driving business, what is your approach to addressing Google if it says that your site is slow or not optimized properly?
Well, the site speed thing is thankfully often addressable just with tools and plugins. If you've got a WordPress site, we've done a lot of testing on this, and there's two tools that we use that could dramatically speed up a website. It's Smush. I love the names, right? Smush Pro and WP Rocket. Also, anything that does kind of the CDN style caching, like I think Cloudflare has services for that. These things there's ways to speed up sites. It's a bit more forgiving than it used to be when we used to go through the code like line by line. So that's a factor. Core Web Vitals is probably the triggering term, if you've heard that sends people running to kind of try to speed up their websites. I do think that a bigger factor is really the quality of the page. So we mentioned, spending 15 hours on a piece of content. My last article was 3,500 words and had 20 images. Hey, Andy, why would you make an article with that much content if site speed was that important? Because the quality of the content is actually the biggest factor. So before you worry about site speed, and there may be technical reasons why you have low rankings and they should be addressed, but after you address those, shortly thereafter, you should be asking yourself, why would Google believe this URL to be one of the top 10 pages on the internet? Did I make this one of the top 10 pages on the internet? Did I support my assertions? Did I add detail? Did I skip any steps? Is it thorough, complete? Is it visual? Is it engaging? Is there, is it referenced by other pages on my website? That's really, when I'm doing SEO, that's my first and last thought is this legitimately one of the best pages? If my audience were the jury and Google were the judge, could I stand and make closing arguments that this URL is like the ultimate on the topic? That's my goal, is to have that level of confidence in it. So yeah, there's a lot of little things in SEO you need to do, many, many search ranking factors. But the best SEOs are a bit obsessed with quality first, even though that may seem squishy and subjective. You should believe in your stuff and then get to work with all the little elements that help indicate relevance.
I like that. It's good to hear, because I'm guilty of myself looking at the Google statistics of how my website's doing, and thinking, oh God, do we need to tweak this and fix that? And we have the plugins you mentioned. We're using almost all of them, plugins and platforms from CDNs to, image optimization. All those things are in place, but it's really hard to satisfy Google. But then we realized, well, we got several leads today through the site, and through the page they say is slow, but yet it's converting. So we're like, let's not take a chance in breaking what's working.
Lee, I'll give you if you want to confirm that site speed is not a primary search ranking factor, search for any phrase, and just put all the sites that rank high into those tools. It's extremely common for sites that rank very high to have relatively low core vital scores or low page speed scores. How is that possible? It's easily possible. It's not a heavily weighted, site speed is not a heavily weighted search ranking factor in my experience.
Here's a rough, very unscientific experiment that I did similar to that. I looked at all my competitors and I looked at the speed of their sites, and most of them were slower. And I said, well, if they're slower, but they're competitors and some of them may be doing more business or less business than us, I'm like, well, that's my competition, not Google. So,
yeah,
you nailed it. My customers,
you did it. You did exactly what I was. So that's a great example, right? It's and I'm not advocating for slow websites. We should all be trying to speed up our sites. It's good for sustainability. It reduces server load at hosting centers. It's a global, it's a carbon emissions thing. There's lots of important reasons. It's a usability thing. People want to access your site from a country or from a region with low connection speeds. And it's a UX thing. We have every good reasons to speed up our sites, so do them and do them all, but don't do them with a high expectation for it affecting your search rankings.
Good to know. Because we've all probably gotten to some moments when we're obsessing over a second or millisecond when our page quality isn't where it should be.
Yeah. Work on your content first.
Make a better site. Yeah. And not worry about that millisecond that you're missing. So, I always want to urge our listeners to subscribe to your newsletter. So on LinkedIn, is that where you're because I know when I look at my email list, I'm hearing from you typically through your LinkedIn newsletter. Is that your primary newsletter?
The newsletter has actually always just been on our website, and it's a bi-weekly newsletter. So when LinkedIn created that,
refers back to the site.
Right. Yeah. So here's the behind the curtain story. So for me, LinkedIn is a syndication platform. It's not the original version of anything. We write the article, it goes on our site, and then I have a virtual assistant take the top 2/3 of the article and put it into LinkedIn as a newsletter. And then because it's on LinkedIn's promoting it to their audience, and they grew. My newsletter never had more than like 15,000 subscribers. LinkedIn promoted the heck out of our newsletter and has 150,000 subscribers there now.
Yeah,
I'm spending almost no effort on it, quite honestly, because it's just the VA is pushing content over there. I think it's successful partly because I gave it a very descriptive but generic name, Digital Marketing Tips. Yeah, that was like it's like kind of an anti-branding moment. Yeah, it's called Digital Marketing Tips. So it's for you if you want that. But then that's a weekly newsletter. So what do I do every other week, right? The off weeks when I don't have a new piece of content. So I go back to high value, older things that are still relevant, evergreen. So every other week, it's a recycling or resyndicating an older newsletter. The visibility of these is so high that it's greater than my entire website. Like there's more, it'll be like 40,000 views on it. Like what? Like that's ridiculous. Like it's breathtaking how many people are on that platform. So I'm getting used to the idea of building on rented land, which we used to say, don't build on rented land.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sold on not doing it, but sometimes rented land is profitable. So it's like it's like real estate, I mean, it is the same real estate reference still sticks. If you're renting profitable land, if you rent land under McDonald's, it might be worth renting the land, because we do the same thing. Said. We also syndicate it. And the reason why I ask you that way, because I said to myself, I know I get Andy's newsletter regularly, but let me see how I get it. And I forgot about, because I know you do the, read the rest of it here on the website. You drive traffic back to the website, which is obviously what we would do. But I was looking through my emails, and when I searched your name in my email list, I saw all the LinkedIn references. And I'm thinking, I don't think I actually subscribed directly to your newsletter. I subscribed through LinkedIn, which still gives me the newsletter. So it's still effective from that standpoint. And you're right, LinkedIn, and I'm waiting, they'll push something new for a period of time and then it dies away. That one though, when I first put out my first newsletter, when you first do it, it announces to your whole database that you have a newsletter. And when I first hit publish, we got 3,000 subscriptions. I'm like, nowhere in marketing does this happen. What happened? What was the error here? Because that's not how it works. Nobody publishes a newsletter and gets 3,000 subscriptions the moment they publish. Then I realized, oh, okay. LinkedIn sent out to 20,000 of my followers.
It's amazing.
And 3,000 subscribe. And I was just, it was unbelievable. And it still seems to be very effective. So
it is. And if, as a sort of a traditional digital marketer, I'm an analytics guy. I want to see traffic and conversion rates. I'm looking at, what sources of traffic bring people to the site and measuring it in that traditional way. I don't get that with LinkedIn. I don't get a visitor, right? I don't get all the metrics, and I can't see the bounce rate of that or all the other engagement metrics on an article. I can't see the open rates on the email, right? You just don't. It's a different thing. But what's the goal here? It's to stay exactly where you started in your very first question. I need to be top of mind with decision makers who need what we do every 4 years. I'll take it. I'm very happy. I'm grateful. Thank you, LinkedIn. I hope we're driving traffic to your platform. If you're listening, LinkedIn, I hope we're driving good traffic to your platform, which of course is your goal. Happy to help support that and grateful to the visibility you've created for people like me and Lee.
Absolutely. And speaking of that visibility and all the articles you've written, because there's been so many of them and been so helpful, is there any particular one article that sticks out as an anomaly, or it's just been lots of feedback, or anyone that sticks out?
Oh, we should all ask that question of each other more, because you're going to get something interesting. I'll say one of the most valuable pieces of content I've published is something that I use that I was never really optimized for search, and I never really even shared it on social media. It's a bottom of funnel sales focused article that describes the best practices for a B2B service page. And it's got this checklist and this diagram. These are 13 things. You'd be crazy not to make sure that your B2B service pages, they should all have these 13 things.
I know that one. I went through all 13. I know that one. I remember it.
People remember that one. We kept it at the top of the blog. It's going to stay there because it's a sales-focused article. It's bottom of funnel content. I pull it up during meetings with prospects because I still do sales. Marketing is really only half of my job. And I'm in a meeting with a prospect. I'm looking at their site. I'm saying, well, let me just share some perspectives on the current site. Maybe things you can do immediately. Here's our best practices. Then you follow up with a link. You send them the link in the follow-up email. And it immediately demonstrates expertise. So I love that article the most because it's the metrics by which it's judged are more directly connected to business outcomes. I use it as a sales tool.
Absolutely. And it's funny because I didn't expect you to mention one that I actually remembered. I mean, I get the value from you every day, and I remember things that I learned through you or through Andy or through Orbit or whatever, but I don't tie it to a specific article. You mentioned one that I do remember specifically, that article, and that one being, okay, let me go through and look at these and make sure we're hitting all these because this is great content. So,
Lee, don't you wish there was a metric somewhere where we could report on memorability? The most important metrics you'll never get, right?
Never get.
You'll never see what people remember the most, what people talk about in word of mouth the most. You can't see which articles of yours got bookmarked the most. Some of the most important things you'll never know, but those would be the ones in my dream dashboard would be,
maybe even a took action report, because I know we took action. We probably added things. I know we added things or subtracted things from our most popular service landing page because of that article. We're like, okay, we don't have this, but we do have that. Add this, move this around, reword this. We took action because of that article. So that would be a great metric to have if you could.
you just made my day, knowing that someone like you, actually applied that. So for the listeners, here's the shortcut. You could find the article, but it suggests making sure all of your pages have faces, making sure all of your pages have quick visual credibility, like logos or as seen in or certifications or awards. Making sure your not articles, I mean your service pages. Making sure your service pages have meaningful subheaders. So don't say our solutions. Say our podcast production and promotion solutions. Be specific in your subheads. So it's a list like that: short paragraphs, internal links, calls to action. The meaningful visuals. It's a pretty straightforward checklist, but it's useful. And if someone like Lee, Lee, if you liked that, that means a lot to me.
Well, sometimes, it's just a matter of someone who has done the roundup. Like, I may have known those 13 things, but was I doing them? And for you to put them in a clear article to say, look, Lee, you may know these 13, but you've thought about them over your long career. Have you actually done these things? And so that organization, even whether you know it or not, whether it's new to you or whether you know it and it's organized for you, there's still that tremendous value in there. So
that reminds me, someone I met once said that, 10x content, people talk about that a lot. And normally what they mean is write a longer, bigger thing. Mm-hmm. But someone else said to me once, you can also be 10x in being 10 times more concise.
Yeah.
Or 10 times more simple, right? To see all 13 things on one little graphic. So I think it's a reminder that 10x doesn't necessarily just mean 10 million words. Can you get to the point faster or make it more accessible or digestible or practical? I think that's maybe partly why that piece works.
Yeah. It's something I'm trying to learn right now because I've been asked to do courses, for example. And one of the biggest hurdles for me to get over is that some of the information's out there. Maybe all of it's out there on YouTube for free, but no one wants to go through 30 videos to find all the information if you can put it in one package, one course, whatever. And that's a tough one for me to get over, to say, why would I do this again if it's already been done? But maybe, like you said, the conciseness to have it in one place is part of the true value.
This is going to sound terrible after my recommendation to do original research, but in some ways, originality is a bit overrated. Your audience won't have seen all of those and won't have time to go pull all those disparate bits of advice together from 30 different videos. So the goal isn't necessarily to be the only or first to say a thing. It's to just package it in a better, more accessible, more findable way than the competitors do. I think that's I struggle. I'm giving a presentation later today where it's like stuff I've talked about a lot, but it's in a new room and these are new people. And I have to remember that there's some of them may have seen some of that before, but for a lot of people, even if I've said it 100 times and everyone else has said it 1,000 times, just wait. They're going to write it down when I say it and they're going to go apply it because they maybe haven't, maybe it's new to them.
So speaking of all that content, Andy, that you have out there, I want to make sure that the listeners are able to continue to learn from you, maybe do business with Orbit Media, read your books, etc. So tell us about how we can continue to learn from you and keep in contact with you and your information.
Well, everything I know, we package up every year into the trying to be 10x content. It's the most comprehensive version of everything we've done, which is a book. It's called Content Chemistry, and it is now finally available on Amazon. It took, I'm sure you can relate, these big projects. It took about 8 months to update from its previous edition. This is version 6. Wow. It's 80 pages longer. It's got everything, pretty much everything in it. Other than that, LinkedIn, we mentioned LinkedIn. And other than that, I would just say orbitmedia.com, which is the platform itself. And that's where you can see our events. We do a monthly webinar. We do an annual conference, which is coming up. But connect with me anywhere. On LinkedIn, the button says follow. You can skip that. For listeners here, just go to the more, and then go down and you can connect with me, of course. Don't hesitate, and I'll help however I can.
Awesome. And listeners, you will not regret it. So again, thank you, Andy, for joining us. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Glad this finally happened, Lee. This was great.
Yes, definitely. And thanks to the listeners. If you're listening to the podcast and you want to see Andy and I, video the podcast and others are available in the podcast section of contentmonster.com. Thanks again.
Thank you for listening to the Business of Marketing podcast. a show brought to you by ContentMonster.com, the producer of B2B digital marketing content. Show notes can be found on ContentMonster.com, as well as ALeeJudge.com. To continue the conversation, be sure to follow the podcast on your favorite podcast platform.